All right, so our first presenter is Ada. So go ahead and tell us your name and where you're from, Ada, and I'm going to screen share afterwards and go to your project.
Hi, I'm Ada Hamilton. I'm from Novato, California. Yeah, I'm excited to show you guys my work and answer questions and talk a little bit about it. It's gonna be fun.
So we're here. If you want to lead me to direct the show any particular part, or
well, I just made these 4 illustrations and then a zine explaining it. And if you scroll down here, you can see every page of the zine. And I basically just wanted to talk about materialism, what that means, and like its impact it has on people, and how you can take something that might be like seen as a negative and like really make it your own thing and like reclaim that to be better in a way, I guess. Like, yeah. And then I made the 4 drawings there. And yeah, I don't know.
I think we can get a better look at your zine in this other screen, Ada. So I'm moving to that one.
Yeah, I can talk about each spread, because below the first one, I actually had a bunch of people send me like images of their like stuffed chairs, like chairs in their houses where they just like filled it with like random junk that they had. And that is a personal favorite page of mine. And there's like a little illustration.
Could you talk a little bit about your research or ideas about collecting versus hoarding, or just also the nature of forming your identity through objects?
Yeah, I personally collect like a ton of stuff, so I was really interested in like the psychology behind that, like why people tend to like accumulate things and not want to let them go, and like what that means. So I ended up going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, going from like collecting to hoarding and bouncing back, and then I got into materialism and I got into like identity, and really just like trying to connect them all in a way that made sense, because in my head it was very clear, but then I was trying to explain it and it was so hard. So I wish I could scroll. Can you go back up?
Yes, I can go back up. Yeah, just direct me.
Like the previous page.
Okay, not this one.
That one, yeah. This
one.
The orange and the pink. Maybe I'm slow.
Am I in the right place?
No, but
this one.
Maybe you're like very glitchy and slow. I can't tell. I'm sorry.
Are you looking for the page with text, or do you have a page number?
Yeah, the orange dots. That's fine.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting the question why I chose a zine, and I'm really interested in the concept of accessibility in art. So I wanted to make like a really graphic, like simplistic sort of format, because I think that's the most effective way you can present art. So I think zines are a really like nice way of doing that. You get to incorporate a lot of visuals, you get to make it really interesting and really like personalized, which I thought also was fitting with the topic because it's talking a lot about like identity and objects. So I thought, hey, why not make an object with a little bit of a personality, right? And then I'm also I really liked that several of the images were placed on traditional ornate frames. It made me wonder how you see the role of materialism and hoarding as it relates to a gallery space. And yeah, the traditional ornate frames, I'm sort of trying to give like a little bit of like dignity and respect to these like messes and like really kind of overlooked objects, because throughout my paper I'm talking a little bit about how when you're really materialistic you can sort of just accumulate stuff and not really think about it, but on the flip side of that you can become materialistic in the sense where you're really overthinking everything and getting really into the object itself, and you're really into like the material itself. And I think that that's super interesting when you care too much about objects, that you just like love them. And I think that's an idea that I thought was worth exploring, because especially today, like we can go through so many things and we can feel really pressured to buy a ton of stuff without really thinking about like why we want it. And so investigating the relationship between stuff and us and like why we connect there is like so important. Sorry to be this guy, but what do you think about the impact of quarantine shelter in place on how we think about physical objects and our stuff? I am personally feeling a little bit suffocated, I guess, is my take. I don't know. I know a lot of people are feeling like a lot less dependent on stores now that it's harder to get there and you're sort of like really valuing what you have at home, I would say. How did you end up choosing the chair as your motif? And can you say if there's any meaning behind the different colors? I really like the chair because when you see like typical portraits, they're on like a chair at like sort of like a 3/4 and they're like sitting very like royally, I don't know. And it like there's a look to a like a portrait. It just has like you're on a chair and you're like being painted. So I wanted to give it that feel a little bit. There's no meaning behind the different colors, I would say. Will you continue the zine as a series? What did you learn from the process of making? I would continue making a zine as a series. I don't know if I would. I've been thinking about expanding this one because I only ended up with like, I don't know how many pages, but I'd like to get more into the graphic design part, because I was really having a lot of fun with that. And the zine is on my website. Have you thought about why used objects may have more value than new objects? Yes, that's a big part of it, about how like sentimental and like nostalgia plays into like how you view your objects, and how objects are like vessels for memories and how they really like contain like what's inside of you. I think that's super important, and like really valuing that. I love that. I love how objects have stories. I love how they're like just like super unique. Yeah. Yeah, that is all I have for you.
There is another question. It says, can we find your zine on your website?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is on my website. How did I like this medium versus paint? I have not used watercolor very much, so this was new, and I actually liked it a lot. It felt really natural for some reason. And I love ink. I typically work in ink, so that was just like fun and really relaxing. And I liked like working from life. I was drawing these from life. And I just thought like repetitive motion, it was very familiar, it was very relaxing, it was like therapeutic, it was just a nice project to do because I've been super stressed out with quarantine and everything, so this was like really nice. Noticing some repetition in imagery, what are some of your favorite objects that you collect? We can talk about this for hours. Oh boy. I'm gonna find, wait. I'm not gonna be able to find it. But on the chair, on the like white grid one, there's like a it's like a stuffed caterpillar that I really like. There's a yellow cardigan on it that is my favorite. those two little creatures on the blue, like kind of teal yellow chair are called yellies. And if you like flip the switch on the back of them and scream at them, the louder you scream at them, the faster they'll run. And I really like them. They're really cute. They're like shaped like little bugs. I have a Beanie Baby on that chair over there. Yeah. I definitely collect the most like clothes and stuff, like yard sales, garage sales, thrift stores. I love looking for them. Like for me, it's all about the thrill of the hunt.
Does your desk still look like that, Ada?
I would say it's worse. Yes.
Ada, what do you think about the stigma of being messy and unorganized?
I mean, I've heard quotes that like a clean home is the sign of like an like empty life, and I've heard that like messy people are more creative, and I agree to an extent. But yeah, I think it's okay to be messy. I think it's interesting. Like if you know where everything is, why not?
Any final comments or questions for Ada? All right, well, we've been doing snaps, so we'll continue that tradition. Thank you, Ada. Our next presenter is Arte.
Hey, I'm Artemisio. I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. My project is called Homeboy. It's kind of a short EP album, kind of on the topic of like Chicano masculinity, Chicano identity, and then like also masculinity as a romantic partner, as a public figure, all the different ways that we don't know how to be a man, or at least I don't. So yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna screen share now.
Little kid in the doctor's office, he can talk just like your prophet. When he talk, you keep the profit. When he cry, you say come off it. You got so many comments, you say I'm a high-risk kid. I ain't supposed to live. I ain't supposed to have the gifts, now I'm supposed to give. My soul was supposed to be leaving. I'm 17, still breathing. I seen better things, I'm gleaming. Now I look like a fucking heart thought, and my heart stopped when I passed that old block. Hope this car, train, airplane, bus, whatever the fuck don't stop. Like my own thoughts, I don't like my own thoughts.
All right, I guess I'm back. Yeah, there's one question in the chat. What were some of my musical inspirations? I don't know. There's a guy named Immortal Technique. He's a rapper and like a very political rapper and a very like aggressive political rapper that I got into when I was like a young kid. He's a Filipino guy, and not to say that Filipino culture is the same as Chicano culture, but there's a lot of overlap in the use of Spanish, and some of the same overlapping collective traumas happened. And it was, part of the first time that I had seen someone I relate to in a role. And it's this thing where like you're a victim of something, but you're like aggressive, and there's some level of pride in your own survivorship. And so that's the main guy. But he's also super homophobic. So I had to, there's other sources too. Can you talk more about the steps to make an EP? I don't know. I like went through and I wrote a lot. And then I found beats that I liked, and then I tried them out. And some things I just can't rap over, like I just don't have that versatility. So I found different beats and I just experimented. Then I wrote a lot of stuff, and then like a few songs happened like the night before I was supposed to turn it in because I just got really stressed. Yeah, a lot of like working and then like stopping out of frustration and then working again. Let's see. Oh, do I feel like it's easier to communicate through music rather than non-musical channels? If not, maybe how does it feel different? I don't know. I mean, like me doing music comes out of spoken word as a practice, and that's just basically public speaking, but sometimes it rhymes. So it's like a very straightforward way to communicate for me. But I like poetry because you can be abstract. And in that way, I can touch on things that maybe I really don't want to explicitly state to a viewer or even to another person. But I can talk about them in a way that feels authentic to me. And that's fulfilling. And the same thing's true for, a track, for a song. And then there's another question. Can you talk a little bit more about not feeling like you belong and what you feel like you learned from this work about belonging or not? Yeah, so I'm a biracial person. Generally, like in terms of gender, non-binary. So that just puts me in the middle of a whole bunch of different stuff. I like the term hybrid territory. That's kind of a theoretical word that's used to describe kind of the non-identity of being between two places. But in terms of like, my feelings around belonging, I don't know if this track, I think being able to go back and work in hip hop, which is like a prominent cultural thing, from kind of my brown ancestry, from my Chicano ancestry, helps me feel a little bit more that I can kind of belong within that culture, despite my existence as a queer person and as a person with white ancestry as well. Over the course of the EP, you have audio clips. Where did you pull those from? My favorite ones, there's a few different sources, but my favorite ones, the ones that I keep referencing, are it's this movie Falling Down. And it's about this guy who works at the Department of Defense, and he's coming home after a long day at work, and he just got fired. And so he's got all these weapons in his car because apparently that's how government workers handle stuff. And he's going through like, LA, and he keeps getting held up. And then eventually he just becomes more violent and violent. So he's just basically going through LA and just killing all the minorities he can. It's kind of framed as a sympathetic thing and a vaguely heroic act. It's kind of hilarious. I wanted to pull from it because I think it has some good examples of racial caricature for Chicano peoples. And it's also just it's connected to my like sense of trying to violently return home. Let's see. Where did your investigation lead besides the EP? Did you learn anything in your research or studio process that surprised you? A lot of my process was just revisiting things. I learned, I don't know if any of you know of the show Star Trek Voyager, but I ended up watching it because I realized that one of the first people who I'd ever seen that looked like me on a television program is a guy named Chakotay, played by Robert Belton. And he's, a native caricature, and it's not even a Chicano figure, but like the person who plays him is mestizo, which is as I am. And I just realized how much of my sense of identity and my own personality has been like an imitation of this Star Trek character and how influential it's been, for better or for worse. That was the big surprise. In your research of Chicano heritage, did you learn some things that you really identified with? Yeah, I think I learned that there's like, and I was researching this while at Oxbow too for a different project, but that there's been a much more large-scale level of resistance and active political rebellion than you're ever taught, in terms of the role that the Chicano movement, the Chicano moratorium is the largest anti-war protest by any ethnic group. It's widely credited as one of the big reasons that we got out of Vietnam. But we don't talk about the 70s and the 60s as the moment of Chicano mobilization. We talk about it when we talk about the hippies. So there's been a deep whitewashing of that history. We talk about the Vietnam protest as a product of, white college students, which there definitely were people of that demographic there and important to the movement. But just realizing kind of the role that Chicano activism has had historically and how little I knew about it going in. Oh, and then someone asked, where can we listen to your other tracks? That SoundCloud link has everything. There's 10 tracks there. It's 15 minutes though, honestly. Like it's an album in name only. But if you would love, I'd love if you want to listen to it. There's some other EPs there too. And like, I think it goes back to like a song I made 2 years ago. So if you really want to embarrass me, that's out there. Oh, can you talk about the cover image and how that relates to the music and your project overall? Also, hey, just let me know when I'm going up against time limits. I'm not really sure. But in terms of the cover image, that's a photo of a drawing I did while on a hike in Oxbow, a backpacking trip. And it was just like a super simple line drawing of a mountain range that we saw from this kind of the peak of the hike on top of this mountain in Pinnacles National Park. I don't know. It was a really meditative process. It was definitely it was a very different natural landscape, but it was me trying to show respect for a natural landscape in a natural world on a piece of paper. Yeah, Rose recognizes it. Yeah. So I was just trying to show that respect. And a lot of my relationship to a sense of home has to do with land and land ethic and kind of coming back home to New Mexico. I've spent a lot of time out here in the high desert. And I don't know, I think if there is one place that I do feel at home, as a kid, I moved around to a lot of different places. I mean, the track's called Custody, you can infer that. But I, never really stayed in one place for more than a week at a time. And even now, this quarantine is the longest I've ever been in one location consistently, other than maybe Oxbow for that 2-month period. But I don't know, the place that I've always had and is always I've always felt I belonged in without any qualifiers is the natural world and the high desert of New Mexico. Yeah.
We do have time for one more question, if anyone has that. I would just like to say I love your music, Arte, and it's been really, really beneficial to me to listen to it and read your work. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the support that Oxbow has provided too. Yeah, it's definitely, I think I treat myself as a very serious person, too much sometimes. And so to make a rap album and post it on a SoundCloud has been a fun adventure in my own image of myself.
I was interested if you plan on making more music or if you see this being an outlet that you would go to for expression in the future.
I mean, yeah, no, I plan to. I'd like to make more work. It's honestly it's the only art I can produce in quarantine so far. I don't know why, but it's the only thing that I seem to get any energy for. So I plan to keep doing that until it no longer makes me happy. But so far it does. And I've got a lot to learn. There's so much in terms of breath control and rhythm and any knowledge of music theory, which I have never had and really don't plan to. But there is a lot that I could learn. And so I'd like to continue that. Oh, and thank you, Jason. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right.
So our next presenter is Maddie.
Hi. So I'm Maddie. I'm from New Mexico, and just first things first, is my mic working?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I did my entire project as kind of this commentary of anonymity in media and how very intimate details about your life can be exposed while people just won't know what you look like, which I find pretty interesting. So my entire piece is set up kind of like public access case files from police reports, but instead of actual existing case files, I've written short stories that go along with illustrated images in which I've obscure the face. But the entire website is set up kind of like an older ARG, or alternate reality game, if you don't know what that means. But I've tried to set it up in a way that makes it feel real enough that you could be invested in the story I'm trying to tell, but still have that air of, I guess, horror is what I was trying to go with. But in the casework section of this website, there is a folder in which there are the portraits paired with the short stories, and I also did audio files that are edited so that they sound kind of garbled, like in local news, sometimes they'll make the person speaking or the person they're interviewing, they'll make the voice higher or deeper to kind of add to that general sense of trying to remain anonymous. Yeah, so that's what I did. All of them are horror based.
Did you say horror based?
What?
I'm sorry, did you say horror based?
Horror based, yeah. I don't know. That's what I made.
Could you perhaps read us one of the case files if you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, I can. Let me, you know what? Patty Ann, either you could choose one for me, or I could just pull one up on my phone and read it. So it's up to you.
We could just do the one that's up on screen if you want.
All right. Oklahoman woman, Ann Winchester, has been found dead in her and her husband's home this Sunday morning. Her death is suspected to be a suicide, as Ann had showed signs of acute bipolar disorder, paranoia, and generalized mania. In the weeks leading up to her death, Ann had reported a complaint to the local police about the shadows in her home. Her husband, when questioned, stated he knew nothing of Ann's report and refused further questioning and remains suspect. All of these stories are dark. They're all very dark, but every single person, I wanted to kind of give personality to every single person that I drew, even if their faces were obscured.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a few questions in the chat, but I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I could totally.
It starts with, why did you decide to obscure all the faces? And also, what drew you to pixels in obscuring them?
So I decided to obscure the faces because generally when removing, how do I put this? In removing the face, you kind of remove a lot of what makes a person, because I feel like a lot of emotion is displayed through the face, and when that isn't drawn, it just isn't conveyed. And also in news media, generally when trying to make a person remain anonymous, they'll obscure the face and the face only. Drew me to pixels and obscuring them. That's just another play on how they usually tend to censor people's faces. Are they based on actual cases or completely fictional? They are completely fictional. The first story is actually written about a man who ate too much spaghetti and died. That's the first story. So yeah, they're all completely fake, all completely from my brain. Are you a fan of horror writing? If so, what authors are you into? I'm not a fan of horror writing. It's weird because I'm a fan of horror in a very specific context. There's a large community online of people who write these things called alternate reality games. and they're kind of a play on creating horrific, very real feeling occurrences, but they're completely fictional. Trying to think of a few of my favorites. The Sun Vanished on Twitter is really good. Local 58 on YouTube is absolutely amazing. Probably one of my biggest inspirations. Do you think being in quarantine impacted the content of these horror stories? No, definitely not. I think I write a lot of and create a bunch of horror content anyway. So this isn't really like I'm going crazy while in quarantine writing these absolutely horrific events. It's more of this is just what I do as a illustrator and an artist. Is there a reason you chose to render them in black and white or with ink? Surprisingly enough, it's not ink. It's actually pencil. So these are done on these massive sheets of paper. And I tend to like doing detail work with pencil. So I'll get a bunch of incredibly sharp and fine pencils and just do a bunch of meticulous little things. Like if you zoom in on this specific image, all of those blades of grass are individually rendered. Did you complete the story before the art? I did. All of the illustrations are kind of a play on the story, like in this illustration, because this is the one I read the story with. One of the things I referenced in the writing was that this woman, Anne Winchester, saw shadows in her home and they were driving her insane. So one of the things that I did different in this piece, rather than the others, was I made the shadow of the house in a much higher contrast than I have done in the other pieces on other shadows. Do you consider the website as part of the work or just a vehicle to host it? I absolutely consider it part of the work. It kind of adds that air of sincerity of I'm trying to make it as realistic as possible without actually making or writing a real story or a piece of nonfiction. Is there any significance behind the houses? That I kind of, are the shadows meant to look like a prison cell? No, that is not intentional. But I started with the first piece on the page of the man who ate too much spaghetti. I started with that illustration, and I drew his house in the background. And that ended up becoming a motif in every single one of the illustrations, that I drew the person's house in the background. And in that second story, it just ended up being more important to the story at hand. Right. Yeah.
Thank you, Maddie. Our next presenter is Nick. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Nick, and talk a bit about your project.
All right. So my name is Nick Silva. I'm from Sausalito and Kentfield, California. And I wanted to see what I would create if I followed my artistic impulses throughout over the course of 1 week. So I created a bunch of pieces over the course of a week and turned it into a zine along with a website. And so the website I wanted to keep super simplistic, just black text and white background. to kind of, to one, go with the motif of the cover page, but it's also a contrast to like what I'm talking about, because it was specifically ADHD or impulsivity within ADHD, which can feel very chaotic and messy. So I wanted to have it be this super blank, clean kind of aesthetic to the website and the cover. So like this is the very first piece I did. I think it was literally the day I decided on my project. At about 12:30 that night, I did this. And it's like there's just song lyrics on the Jason, on that first page, the text on the first one. There's so on the first page, I forget what I was either watching or listening to something, and it said please remain calm, and that's what sparked it. That's what sparked the piece, and I just wrote it down, and then started going all out with this. The text in the black pen is song lyrics. The one on the left is from a song called Warm Honey by Willow, and I forget what song the one on the right is from. And at some point in it, I suddenly felt bored, and I just scratched that out in red pen on the bottom. But it was just an impulse. Yeah, and I just used a bunch of, like, pretty much every pen that was on my desk I used in that piece. But then this text here is from my research paper. So I embedded my research paper into the zine itself. And the photos behind these big blocks of text are from just an impulse I had to go out and shoot in Sausalito. That's just where that came from. And then with this one, it's kind of supposed to represent how chaotic and overwhelming it can feel at some points. And there's this like center focus point, and like you know where you're going, but you have so much going on in your periphery. It's hard. It can be really, really hard to stay on that without being pulled away.
Nick, there's a few questions.
There are?
Yeah, the first one is, what did it feel like to allow yourself to go on this journey and give into those impulses?
Kind of freeing. It was kind of nice to just be able to, like, when I had a thought, it was just, don't store this for later. Don't like write it down, or don't like try to remember it. Like just do it then in the moment, which was nice. And I don't know, it was just kind of an experiment, because usually I'll have to, put stuff on hold and try to remember it or write it down, but then I'll forget that I even wrote it down, and I'll come back to my notes like 3 months later, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I was going to do that, and then it just never happens. So it was cool to be able to just like be able to just go. And that's something with quarantine that was actually a little bit fortunate for this project, is I didn't really have anything else going on. So if I got the impulse to do something, I could pretty much just do it. Yeah, which was nice. The next question, where did the idea of following your artistic impulses? So Daisy's question, I'm not sure where it came from. I'm not sure. I had done a piece, like a writing piece at Oxbow about ADHD that I wasn't really that happy with. And I guess this is kind of like redoing it in a sense. But I'm very happy with this one and how it turned out. Is please remain calm a reference to quarantine? Not specifically. It could be seen as that, but it's also just something that like I feel like is a pretty common, like, not that exact phrasing, but something that's said to people with ADHD or people who are prone to impulsivity, is that, you know, just stay calm, like chill out, relax, and it can be really difficult. Yeah. Has your relationship with ADHD changed as a result of this project? I think it has, just because it's from the research, it's given me a lot more understanding into like what chemically is going on and, you know, why it occurs, physical differences within the brains of people with ADHD. Yeah, I think in that sense, yes. Where did I pull my research from? All over, just on the internet. That's really all that I had access to on the topic. So CDC, there's a ADHD magazine called Attitude, but ADD. Yeah, just a bunch of different websites and sources. Can you talk about what we're looking at on the page where you log your time? This is kind of just a bunch of random little sketches I did from impulses. So these bigger squiggles are just, that's like a full, like, in between like an A4 and a letter size piece of paper. Just a really big, a pretty decent sized piece of paper that I just covered in those. On the right, in the right top corner, I went out one day and just tried sketching some fishermen that were out there. I don't draw very much, so they're not that good, but it was just something that kind of happened, and an impulse I had, and I went and did it. I mean, everything here is from an impulse, of course. So these two figures in the bottom right and top left are both from the same page where I was just practicing drawing people. I tried to log a whole day, and then I forgot about it after 11:24. I forgot to keep logging, so I have from 10:01 when I woke up to 11:24 logged, and the rest of the day I have no idea what happened. Same, you know, like the little corner thing above the figure in the top left was just on an impulse. The face that's covered by the squiggle thingies is another, it's the same size as the squiggle page, but just like I had the random impulse to draw this like bust all in highlighter. I don't know why, but it just kind of happened. What do the colors represent? Which colors? Like, I'm not sure what colors you're referring to. Did you complete these in stages or in one solid sitting? No, each, on this page, some of these were in one sitting, some of them weren't. This ball of dots is 5 of the same image pasted together. And I did that one little ball over the course of like 2 days, just randomly spending like 10-15 minutes making little tiny circles. The squiggle page was in 2 sittings, but the sketching of the fisherman sketches and the 2 figures and the outline of the face, those were all in different sittings, but 1 sitting each. Same with the person behind the squiggles. There is no this yellow Bronco page, not really. It's just a photo I took on an impulse, and I liked that photo. Yeah.
I'm just gonna interject really quick. We have time for one other question, but we're kind of running up against time. So
Okay. Yeah. So combined digitally, do you have a preference for working digitally versus analog in your writing or studio practice? I really enjoy working both digitally and analog. It just depends on what I'm doing. I like digital photography because you can do a lot manipulation wise, which I find to be really interesting, and I can create really interesting stuff from it. But I also like the process-based analogness of like working in a dark room. You know, same with collage. I like both, but I find that I don't really, when I'm doing a digital collage, I have this thing where I really only tend to pull from my own photos. I never pull from other sources. Versus analog collage, I pull completely from other sources and never from my own. Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Rozella.
Hi, I'm Rozella K from Seattle, Washington, and I made a short film series about adolescents' paradoxical relationship with social media called Inner Pieces. And this came from my realization that everything exists within the inner woven layers of truth. And as with social media, I believe there's layers of comforting lies beside disheartening truths. And I wanted to focus on that paradoxical relationship. And so my objective was to capture this relationship with social media and the self-exploration of developing our most authentic selves, surviving within the unrealistic standards of social media culture.
I'm going to share my screen and show your website a little bit. I'm not sure where to go. I hope that everyone had a chance to watch Rozella's films. And if you did and you have questions, please go ahead and chat those. I'll ask one of you out loud, Rozella, which is, do you feel that like you and your peers are becoming disenchanted with social media?
No, so I believe my relationship with social media has definitely grown, and social media has been always a platform for me to stay connected with people, but also to explore my forms of expression. And now that I've learned to really find who I am, I have the option to no longer use social media as a box that I need to mold myself into, but a platform to experiment with different expressions and connect with different people to create together. And social media has also been a platform of vulnerability, and that's also what I wanted to focus on, and how I believe is a way for social media to become a healthier platform for people.
There's a question asking you about your choice of music in the video, particularly the jazz.
Yeah, so jazz emerged from blend of marches, blues, and other kinds of music, and this was my way to represent the paradoxical aspects of the beautiful process in finding ourselves through the unrealistic standards of adolescent social media culture. So, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, someone asked, you posted a healthier, posited a healthier social media platform based on the principle of vulnerability. What role should digital um, anonymity play in the way people could be vulnerable? Oh yeah. So social media definitely offers people with a space to share their stories without the burden of the world. And I believe with our own space, we really have this opportunity to grow together. And by sharing our stories with other communities, I think that openness and vulnerability can not only validate others' experiences, but also bring healing within the community. So that's what I think would be a healthier way to using social media.
There was another question by Virginia that is, what was the process like in deciding to create the two separate videos?
Yeah, so at first I was trying to, my goal was to portray this paradoxical relationship. And I think everyone has different experiences when it comes to social media. And so the first part of the series was more of my own personal narrative and how I came to define my identity through social media. And the second part was more of a social experiment in an art form with others in sharing what their relationship with social media looks like. So the second part in doing, taking part as more of a social experiment, it took some interview process, and during that process I tried to keep the guideline more broad so that there wouldn't be any limitations in people's interpretations in what relationship with social media looks like, since that can be taken in many different directions. And someone asked, how to find that identity and truth, reality or projection of reality, plain to adolescent, social media use from your experience and research? Yeah, so, this, my objective through this project was to promote healthier ways of using social media in ways of celebrating others' experiences with social media and showing that those paradoxical relationships and the ups and downs we have in finding ourselves isn't a journey that we have to go through ourselves. And my intentions through this project and what I wanted to get out of this project was for social media to become a room for acceptance, authenticity, and aliveness within themselves, and platforms not of validation, but to explore ourselves and find the growth within the authenticity. And so, yeah, I really just want social media to become a space for adolescents to to just explore their forms of expressions and, yeah, connect all of us through that form of vulnerability, if that makes sense. And someone asked, one of your pieces has a distinctive vintage feel as if it was old footage. Talk about your decision to approach that way. That wasn't intentional, but I just wanted to keep the footage more monochromatic and simple so that the attention would go to the context itself and not about the mask and the gloves, because I think those props can be very strong And I just wanted the focus to be on the conceptual idea of the film. Tell us more about the mask and why. Yeah, so social media gives the ability to choose what to reveal about ourselves and promote rather positive characteristics while also filtering out the negatives and without having to share the truest form of self. And so the mask and the gloves represent the persona we have on our social media platforms and just a place for art to experiment with different things. And especially at the end of the film where I play around with the mask, like on and off, that was for me to represent like social media can be an option for us and no longer a mold that we need to fit ourselves into. So when we really get to find out who we are, we don't have to let others define who we are and just accept that we can have different forms of self without one or other being less true. Someone asked, are the words that accompany each of the pieces from your friends actually their words or ones you assigned to them? So some of them were the ones that were assigned to them and some weren't. And the interview process of the video making and filmmaking and the interviews were separate. And through phone calls where we discussed like ideas and what kind of topics we wanted to discuss through our short films, we went over what they shared what social media and their relationship looks like to them. So with my understanding, I kind of matched those words I received and the video clips together. Okay, time for one more question.
I have a question. In the video, that wasn't the social experiment one, the pieces one. There's pink lipstick that you put on the mask, and it seems like that pink lipstick like was a catalyst of some sort. And I was wondering what the role was when you were making it of that lipstick.
Yeah. So with that part of the series where I talked about my personal narrative and my relationship with social media, I took more of a conceptual approach rather than informative. And within those conceptual approach, I discussed many different aspects of social media when it comes to finding ourselves. And the unrealistic beauty standards played a big role as one of the impacts in finding myself. And so I saw like red lipstick and the red nail polish in the beginning as more of a conceptual approach in talking about the beauty standards. I could have took more like raw approaches to it, like body image and such, but I wanted to communicate that idea with a wider range of perspective without focusing on one specific beauty standards or one aspect of social media. And kind of going along with the same idea, that was also with the choreography at the beginning, just playing around with self-expression and like exploring which forms of expression fits true to ourselves and what we can use to find who we are within social media.
Thank you, Ro. So enjoyable to watch your presentation and your artwork.
Thank you.
And our final presenter is Virginia.
Hi, I'm Virginia. I'm from San Francisco, and I made a film that was about how technology and media as a whole can impact one's creativity. And so I interviewed a bunch of different people from different generations to like sort of explore how different levels of technology in your childhood can impact like your work and your art growing up and your current art and relationship with technology. And then in the actual film, I just wanted to sort of create like an abstract expression of my experience and what I got from the interviews and talking to other people. So yeah.
I can screen share if we want to get a. Virginia, did you share information with your peers about the impact of social media? Did you and Rozella have powwows?
Wait, can you repeat that?
I said, did you share information with your peers about social media? It seems like it's a subject matter that was really captivating to several of you this round, and I think it, you know, we're in such a moment where it's such a part of our lives in a different way.
Yeah, I think a lot of us just have like a bias to focusing on that because it's such a central thing in our lives, especially in quarantine. Like I just find myself going on my phone in like every free moment. So I don't know, I think we just question like why is there such an attraction to be on it and engage with everyone in that way.
In your video and in your paper, Virginia, when you interview people, it seems like you're asking them often about their first interaction with like a personal technology, whether that be a phone or a TV. And I was wondering what you thought the significance of that kind of initial encounter of technology. What is the significance of it in this work?
Yeah, a lot of my questions were based on like, what was your relationship when you were growing up and like, what are specific memories you have about that? And I guess I just was like curious about other people's perspectives because I don't know, we can't really understand I can't really understand like what other people went through because I was exposed to technology my whole life, and I was just curious like what it felt like to not have a computer in the house when you were young and not have a phone when you turn 12, have a phone when you get out of college. And so I was really curious on that. And I also was really trying to get at like the idea of your relationship with art as a child and how like there's such this carefree environment and everyone when they're a kid they do art, I think, and you never really overthink stuff and there's not really much distraction from that. And I like when I'm making art I always try and like get back to that sort of state where you're just not overthinking things, and I try not to like get a ton of inspiration online because it's just like always surrounding me and it's like just an easy way to like get an idea to draw something. So I don't know, I was curious about like from the people that I interviewed, they all didn't really have technology when they were growing up. So like how art and just like not having any sort of distraction impacted the way they like create art, and how like growing up and getting exposed to technology impacted their art as like in the process, you know, like if that makes sense. Someone asked, how do you feel your own art practice has been impacted by technology? I think that throughout this whole process, I really found that there's so many benefits, but also so many things that just aren't great for the creative mind and creating. And one is that I find myself like constantly on Pinterest and getting inspired by other people's work. So there was one clip in the video where someone said, I wonder if I didn't have technology, if my art would be more authentic. And I think that is like very impactful because I feel like even though I may not think that it's directly impacting my art, I feel like subconsciously it is, because I'm just constantly like looking at other people's art, and sometimes it just feels like almost copies, and like yeah. And I just also find myself getting really distracted by the phone, and I can barely do any sort of art without listening to music on my phone. And it's like a constant struggle for me to try and separate technology from my art. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about technology, what would it be? And in my interviews, I had a lot of people talk about like what their ideal technology would look like, and like ideal phone. And a few things that I found that I definitely would love would just be like a phone where you could communicate, call your friends, just like an old flip phone, but you could also take pictures, because I love being able to like have a really good camera on my phone. And that's like the main, I have so many photos on my phone, and I use it as a camera like a lot of the time. So I would ideally have a phone that could just call, but with a camera. That would be my ideal. I'm curious about your choice of imagery that goes along with the interviews in terms of the hair braiding and hair cutting scenes. So most of the scenes I wanted to create like the moments that we have in childhood that are very like handmade, and these tender moments that I feel like a lot of times we miss when we're just constantly being surrounded by technology and constantly scrolling through apps. So like doing a watercolor or braiding the hair, or giving someone a haircut, or making lemonade, they just felt like moments in childhood that I just very like associate them with childhood so much. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to portray those tender moments that I feel like we miss. And what was the hardest part of your process? I think, well, I really wanted to try and challenge the viewer, and like not directly just show media on the creative mind, but also have that aspect of childhood and all these moments, and try and find a way to portray that. But technically a challenge that I had was I had a lot of problems with my video editing app, and I didn't have access to edit my video for like several days at a time. And it was very much an obstacle, but I definitely had to work very intuitively by the end, and not overthink my work, and just go with what felt right. And I think that was a real benefit. And the work that like came out of it felt very right. And I think if I had several days to just contemplate my work, I might not have come up with that sort of intuitive, honest work that really spoke to the topic.
Virginia, I have a question. Do you think that you'll continue exploring this topic in future artwork that you create?
Yeah, I have, I don't know, I find myself always drawn to making work that's very nostalgic and reminds me of childhood. And I don't know, I just like always found myself drawn to that topic. And even if I start with an idea that doesn't seem like it relates to that, it always somehow relates to it. And I don't know why that is, but I definitely see myself doing that kind of work just because I'm drawn to it. And I don't know, I love like the concept of nostalgia and memories, and I just love working with that. Okay, the intimacy of the moments comes through in the still images. Was it difficult to choose them for specific people? Did people make it more honest? Like was in choosing the people to play out the scenes, I I actually didn't really plan that out that much. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking, but for example, the hair braiding scene, I guess that was intentional. I wanted to braid one of my sister's hair because I don't know, that also just felt very childlike, like braiding each other's hair. But there wasn't a ton of intention behind that. I think that using people and like my family members in the scenes definitely like made it more honest, I guess, because those are the people that like surrounded me in my childhood. And yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Virginia. That was really interesting. Yeah.
So a final overall snap clap for everyone. I have so much gratitude to all of you students for the amazing work and effort that you made, and to the parents for participating in this process with us and sticking with it. And it's been, it has had many ups and downs, but I think the results speak for themselves. It's just incredible, amazing work. Would any of my other Oxbow compatriots like to say any final remarks? Okay, well, thank you all. And
I think that Jennifer was just about to say something.
yes.
I was just going to say congratulations, what I just said in the chat box, but you guys did stellar work. This was all one big grand experiment. And I'm just so impressed by how you rose to the occasion in such thoughtful ways. And it just gives me great hope for the artists of the future. So thank you.
Yeah, we're really proud of you guys.
All right, well, it's always feels a little anticlimactic to leave a Zoom session. I've been trying to think of a way to make it less anticlimactic. I'm not sure it exists. But thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate your participation. Have a good night.
Bye, everybody.